Hey, everybody, this is Kenny. Welcome back to the Sports on the Positive Tip podcast. This is where we have conversations at the intersection of sports and faith. I will be joined by my partner, Kenny Squared, in just a few moments. Today, we got to speak to Christian Philosopher, and the host of The Truth of the Matter Is podcast, Johnathan Drayton. And Johnathan talks so much about combining all of his education in history, philosophy, political science, and really taking all that and just being like Jesus every day, being more like Jesus every day. We talked about how God speaks to him and how God can speak to you, how he's experienced God's love. And we got to talk some NBA. So we've got it all for you today. You don't want to miss a second of this. Let's get to it. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Sports on the Positive Tip podcast. And I'm joined by my partner, Kenny, and we have got a tremendous show today. We've got just an outstanding guest. And this is where we have conversations at the intersection of sports and faith. It's going to be a lot of faith today. We're going to get some sports in, don't worry, but we're going to get a lot of faith because we are so interested to hear more about this young man's story. And so I want to introduce Christian philosopher and host of The Truth of the Matter Is podcast, Johnathan Drayton, to the show today. Johnathan, welcome, man. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. Thank you so much for having me on. I've almost hoped to, be invited on. I'm actually a new subscriber to your show. I think you're doing a phenomenal job. You're riding the ship here really well. So I'm glad to be here.
Oh, thanks so much. So appreciate you saying that. And your show, I got to listen to several of them. They are awesome too. I love your partner and you. I love the banter back and forth. So I'll mention that at the end again because we want folks to jump into your show as well because you talk about some great things. Salt of the Earth this past week, I thought was fantastic. So I'm going to turn it over to Kenny and let's get the questions started because we want to find out more about you.
Yeah. Well, let's start out with tell us a little bit about your story. Like, how did you get from all the things that you did in college to the point of starting a podcast?
Yeah, so, it was really inspired because I had this desire to search for truth. And, being in the philosophy realm, we always looked at truth as an actual morality concept instead of looking at it as an actual person that actually lived it out and did everything aligned in which that left a model, a blueprint that we can actually follow. And at least for me, growing up, yes, I grew up in a church. I had some understanding of who God was, but there was most important thing that was lacking was my understanding of his word. And that's something that changed my life tremendously. It put me in a different trajectory of how I saw myself, how I viewed the world, and the approach that I have in life. I would say at least going through my experience in college of searching out for this truth, I came to the realization that there are a lot of different ideologies. There's a lot of religiosity that exists. There's a lot of theologies that exist in the world that people tend to lean towards and pursue. But I think the biggest thing that kind of flipped and caught my attention was the addressing of sin. And I don't believe there's a lot of ideologies and religious belief systems that address that one situation. This understanding of how sin is really captured and understood within the heart of the person. And then we have Jesus Christ who's come to give us a new heart. And we learn this in Ezekiel 36:26 about giving us a responsive heart that then conforms and can be transformed by the way that we think, our actions, our attitudes, our motives, our thoughts. So I would say going through that experience in college and searching out truth and studying different religious belief systems, that was something. And then I'll toss one more thing in there. I think it's in the Gospel of John, chapter 14, verse 6. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. That's a powerful declaration, right? That led me to understand that, confrontation is good, is necessary, because eventually when we're trying to understand what truth really is, there's really two different things. There's falsehood and then there's actual truth. So there aren't, at least for me in the Christian walk and faith, many different truths. I believe there's only one truth. Problem is, when in the society that we live in now, how responsive is that to people that are walking different, lives and doing different things and trying to embrace and don't want to be righteously judged. There's a lot of those things going on.
Yeah. Well, and let's dig a little bit deeper into that, because I feel like that's one of the biggest things that I see is like the idea of relativism, and especially like when we're talking about a postmodern society. What would you say to someone that does believe that, yes, there is no absolute truth? Because I do see that a lot, like a lot of that relativism. What would you say in response to that?
Well, I would say that, when it comes to God, right? A lot of us like to anthropomorphize God. So what I mean by anthropomorphizing God is putting God in a box, limiting God. And I think when it comes to the reality of accountability, we get that in the scriptures. There's accountability for everything that we do in life, based upon our choices and based upon who we are. And I think when people want to provide an alternative to how they want to see the world, it's accepting that accountability that has to be obvious to the believer or to a person that is searching or looking for something that's permanent,
Hmm.
right? So I think when you come to those conclusions, you come to that realization, it's going to be countertive against what I want to do, right? The battle between the flesh and between the spirit, right? We learn that in Romans chapter 4. That's consistent no matter where you go, no matter what belief system that you're operating in. And I think once you narrow it down to those points of views, it becomes obvious that this standard of God or this view of God, there has to be something that doesn't completely explain it all, right? I was having a conversation with a friend the other day who's highly into, apologetics, and he's into the whole deconstruction of faith and whatnot. And I said to him, if we can get everything to be understood from our understanding, then God can't really be God, right? There's a passage in Second Corinthians talks about the truth is reserved to those who love Christ. So if
Hmm.
you don't love Christ, then any form of truth that is presented to you, you're going to reject it, and that rejection usually comes from it comes from uncomfortabilities that reside within yourself about what God says about the world and your purpose within it. So
Hmm.
that's how I would answer that question.
Hmm.
Nice. Yeah, it does really seem like you have I love like your perspective of kind of taking that um perspective of like not just this is the biblical perspective, but philosophically why it connects back to scripture.
Yeah.
Um so one of the other things that really sticks out to me kind of about your story is the fact that you triple majored, which more power to you, because I can only imagine how insane that was at times. Um, but like, how do you? Because we're all about having the conversations at the intersection of sports and faith. How do you have those conversations at the intersections of faith and history and philosophy and political science? How does that work for you?
I would say that God has his hand in human history. And I would say the influences of all those different topics and subjects, I think God is the original author of it. And the reason why I say that is I'll give you a couple of examples. If you read the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke, and you look at chapter 4, and you look at the temptations that Jesus faced with when he was in the desert. If you really look at that through the lens of the subjects that we study, we can see that Jesus was tempted economically, he was tempted politically, and he was tempted religiously. You might say, well, how do you come to that conclusion? Well, look at the first temptation, right? He says, take those stones and turn it into bread. The whole hermeneutic aspect of reading scripture and having a basic understanding on how it correlates the understanding and looking at it from nuanced perspective is that in the hermeneutic, one of the most important aspects of getting clarification and understanding and how it relates it to how you get a comprehension of it is looking at the grammar. And in the grammar, in one translation or one book is stone, and in another one is stone. So you're looking at a plural and singular aspect of it, right? So if you really think about it, when he said turn that stone into bread, then he's saying satisfy your own hunger, right? Because Jesus was in the desert for 40 days. So you're hungry, obviously. Use your power and satisfy what it is to fulfill your hunger. That's one aspect of the economic aspect. The other aspect is he said, turn those stones into bread. So he's saying, take the stone and make monetary value out of it. That means take it and multiply the stone so that you can feed people. So the question is, how are you using your power? The political aspect and the religious aspect speaks about using his power irresponsibly. right? So if he says, throw yourself down and the angels will come rescue you, right? He's basically saying, use your power irresponsibly so that we can question who you are in God, right? We know that Jesus is God, but we know that we're looking at Jesus from the humanistic perspective, his humanity. So if he's God as a human being, then why are you using your power in a way that we can be challenged and questioned, right? The other one is political. Bow down to me, and I give you all the kingdoms of the earth. Now we know all the earth belongs to the Lord and thereof, right? But in this aspect, he's again addressing and attacking Jesus in his humanity, not in his God form, but in his humanity. So when we look at those things, we see that when we conform it to how we view the world now, through the lenses that we go and study school for, we see that there was politics, there was religious aspects, there was economic aspects throughout the scriptures. We see that Jesus talks about money all the time. It's mentioned tons and tons of times, but people don't visualize it like that. Well, for one final thing I'll say is just looking at the Bible in a sense, one of the measurements that I spoke about in, approaching this new year, right? I don't believe in New Year's resolutions just based off of Proverbs 20:25, but I believe in themes, right? One of the most important things that you can measure success is through chaos, through time, and through productivity. And there's scriptures that measure that out so that you can see them, right? So I think a lot of times when we view this book as a religious book, but we don't see how it can open up to other perspectives, we're not seeing how much God has blessed us and can open up our eyes to the reality that, hey, this book covers more than just the story. Like we know the big thing, the big element of the story is about Jesus, but he's addressing so many other things. And the more you study, the more you read his word, the more he reveals to you, the smarter you are, and the more discerning you are to what you're dealing with in society at large.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
I don't know. I said it. I'm sorry.
Wow.
Yeah, go
No,
ahead.
don't,
Yeah.
please don't apologize. Ken, I guess that's my turn too, but
Yep, you
we're,
up.
we're both just amazed at what you said there. And it makes so much sense. I now I really want to, Ken, if it's okay, I want to ask this question. I think it was last Monday, right? That everything happened in Nashville. And because I'm sure you get tapped on the shoulder when things happen in the world based on not just your studies, but on your show and what you speak about. So I'm curious, how do you maneuver through the world today? So much going on. I mean, we're right here in New York where the ex-president is about to be arraigned. I mean, it's hard to even think about that that's really actually happening, and we know that that divides people, unfortunately. So two-part question is, how do you maneuver through these days? What is God speaking to you? And then what advice do you give folks that come and ask you, Johnathan, what do we do, man? What's God speaking to us with all these things that are happening in the world?
hmm Well, I would say that regardless of who's president, God's on the throne.
Hmm.
I think when you go to the book of Jeremiah and it talks about people that are in that captivity, and God gives them instruction. He says, build houses. He says, pray not just for yourselves, but for the success of the people around you. You know, Speaking of sports, right? We know what happened with Damar Hamlin, right?
Hmm.
And we know that in a state where we are powerless, we know the only thing that has power is prayer, right? We know in James the prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. And in that moment, regardless of the faith, we realize the importance of how prayer can elevate your mind and also you know, can help a situation in which that's out of your control, but we know that God can do exceedingly abundantly whatever we ever think or imagine in moments that we're powerless, that we can't do anything.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I would say in these moments, I would say always remember who you are in Christ,
Hmm.
right? Always remember that you're not a product of your environment, but you're a person that maneuvers in your environment,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
When we are asked to scripture tells us, always be prepared to give a reason for the hope that you have, but do it gently and respectfully.
Hmm.
There's always a mark on us in regards to how we carry ourselves, right? Make sure our speech is always seasoned with salt so we know we have to answer people, right? In Colossians. So I think God has called us, as you were talking to me about earlier, about being salt and light in a world that's full of darkness. We are the moral integrity of that operates within a society that provides the hope. And to why Jesus said, and he made it clear that, I pray that you don't take them out of the world, but I pray that you protect them while you're in it.
Mm.
Right. So I think the most important thing is that people need us. Right. We're a reflection of Jesus Christ. We're needed in the world. I always say we're not the main course, but we're the alternative to the society. In other words, that means that when people are ready for truth, or people are ready for a relevance or an understanding of what that looks like, they look towards us. So that's why we always got to make sure that we're doing something in reflection of what God wants us to do. And that's being a light that exposes darkness and illuminates things so that people can see. So I think that I wouldn't pay so much close to what the devil's doing, but what God's doing. So I think God is raising individuals that at some point they're going to get tired of the different transformational things that are happening in our society, of the adjustments that have to be made. Now, don't get it twisted. I would say when I look at the president of the United States, he is for the people, by the people, which means that as a society continues to morph and change and add in new additional things to make others comfortable, that's his job. That has nothing to do with his faith.
Right.
Right. And I think that when you conject the two, and even though interesting enough, we're a society that's a Christian nation, apparently, right? But then you still have racism and you have the lack of spreading the gospel to others, and all of us being seen in the image of God, the Imago Dei, that's lacking. So I think, you can only control what God has placed you in, those circumstances and situations. But I think, in Romans chapter 1, verse 12, it says we should be mutually encouraged by one another's faith. I think we have to continuously pray and hope that where God has placed certain people at, that they continue to stand bold in the faith. And I would say make sure that your faith is a conviction, not a preference, right? The conviction is something you believe no matter what. A preference is something that changes over time with newfound information. So I think as long as we're in a society and we're holding on true to what we believe, our salvation, and then what God has promised us and through the Holy Spirit as a deposit, I think that we'll be just fine. And I believe that God would make the necessary adjustments as long as you know that he's on the throne. And regardless what is happening, we know that people rise through political power and then they're removed.
Yeah.
And we know that there are some cases that people are there so that we can really see the evil and the destructive and the assassination that people implement on other people's character in those positions. So we learn more and more about the world that we're living in and how chaotic and devastating and disgusting it is. And we know that God, in the midst of it all, we know that he's restraining evil. We learn that in Romans. And we know that when God eventually lets go, we know chaos is going to run rapid. So imagine God is restraining evil now. Imagine when he's not, how much more bad things are going to get.
Yeah.
Right. I'm thankful for what we got right now because we ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great advice. I'm curious, who's inspired you, Jonathan, to just have this wonderful, not only vast amount of information, I think that's secondary, but this tremendous faith that it's so apparent that we see. And you just mentioned how the preferences may change and how our feelings, I think, change, but our faith just remains a rock. It's so apparent in you. Who's inspired you?
So I would say what's inspired me or who. I wouldn't say anyone in particular has inspired me, but I did feel to some extent, what's kickstarted my belief was that I got tired of being ignorant. Like I got tired of going to church and being the Christian that supports the past and everything else, but then I don't know God individually for myself. And I think that when you begin to read and study scripture and get to know God on a personal level, then I think what that does for you is that it elevates the way that you see the world and more importantly, impact that you have. And then I believe God is doing a lot more talking than we think,
Hmm.
because obviously it's the Christ that's in me that allows me to get to a certain place where I can speak so eloquently about things.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say it's an actual person. I would also say there's a passage in Romans that says, "Let God be true and every word from man be a lie." I would say as I grew up, there were a lot of people in my life that weren't great role models. So I know you look for a role model, but it's very hard to find a God-fearing role model these
Hmm.
days. And I
Hmm.
would say there was a lot of people that I encountered that actually gave me reason to pause as to wanting to appreciate or acknowledge them as a role model. I'll give you an example. There was an individual that I met, obviously I'll keep them nameless,
Hmm.
and he inspired me in regards to working harder in football. Like, he would say, "Hey, make sure you're running 2,100-yard sprints with 20, 30 seconds in between." I thought that was impossible in high school, right? But he told me, "Yo, you have to elevate yourself. You have to train harder." He inspired me to do 1,000 push-ups a day. Like, he inspired me to do things that I thought were impossible. But along the line, he was a womanizer. Like, so I ate the meat, threw away the bone. So I embraced the sports elements, but his personal life, it wasn't that great. I remember one time us going through the train tracks and swiping, and we going in at the same time, and then the police coming out the back saying, "What's going on here?" Right? So I
Right.
mean, whatever was going on with him in the personal, I embraced him because I looked up to him in the aspect of sports and wanting to be a better football player overall. But I
Yeah.
realized long term he didn't have his stuff together in life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know if he realized that, but I still acknowledged him and recognized him for who he was in spite of that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I'll say one other thing. There was an individual I met in college where I was working for UPS, and he was my supervisor. And come to find out, he abused his wife. He and people judged him off of those circumstances.
Hmm.
But speaking to him, smart guy, intelligent guy. Some of the choices he requested or suggested that I should do, like, "Hey, let's have sex with these women, these random people, selling of drugs and stuff." I didn't embrace that with him. And long story short, he eventually ended up having to go to jail because he was caught, breaking his, I think it's called your probation.
Hmm.
And I remember
Hmm.
him requesting, "Hey, can you write a letter to me based on the experience that I had?" So the positive aspect of him, I shared.
Right.
And then I did Matthew 25. I went to his jail, I visited him, I
Hmm.
wrote letters to him. I showed the Christ-like in me to him, to a person who actually was lacking that. And he's
Yeah.
a free man now, and I've been able to see him. So I don't know if he ever embraced Christ, but in that moment of darkness that he was in, I do know for sure that I did give him hope that got him through it. And now he's taking care of his family. Again, I don't know where he's along the lines of Christ and me trying to share as much as I could, but I at least got him to a point now that he's living his life. And hey, if paradise is here on earth for him, then I guess that's his choice, right? But we're all entitled to our choice.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I would say. No real role model, but I little sparks of influencement
A little
from
bit of
different
everybody.
people on the
Yeah.
brighter side. Yeah.
Yeah. Ah, that's awesome. And you were a light for him in what was, I'm sure, a dark place. And by you staying in touch, because he probably was expecting, hey, nobody's going to contact me, especially Jonathan's not going to, and you did. So that is awesome. Wow, this is this is amazing. I think we talked to Jonathan all day. Kenny, I'll turn it back over to you.
Um, I think one of the things that really stuck out to me um, is like you trying to figure out your own faith for yourself. And I feel like depending on where you are at with your faith, it can be really challenging to kind of take that next step. What advice would you give someone that like they're maybe they realize that like they're missing something and they want to like take that next step to kind of embrace more of who God is for themselves? Like what advice would you give them?
I would tell them, listen, there's a lot of different places people are searching for God. I think where people aren't searching is his word. And I would say that's where I would go. And I know that people are lacking, you know, moral support. People are lacking confidence. Listen, there's been so much evolution when it comes to God's word. There's different translations that exist. There's audio Bibles that exist, right? We're getting to a point now that we are without excuse. There's different sources of YouTube there's so many God content that's out there. I would say get into the word, right? You're not going to learn more about God anywhere else than his word because he sounds like exactly like what he wrote, right? The inspiration, we know all scriptures, Holy Spirit breathed and inspired. And therefore, I think that's where you have to go. And I think there's two things you have to remember when it comes to pursuing God, right? One, if you draw near to him, he'll draw near to you, right? That's in the book of James. Another thing, too, is Matthew 7:7, right? Asking you shall receive, seeking you will find, knocking the door will be open to you. But I love it in the NLT. It says, keep on asking, keep on seeking, keep on knocking, which means that your first knock, that doesn't mean you stop. That doesn't mean you give up, right? It's clear in Galatians 6:9. It says, don't become weary in doing good, for you'll reap a harvest if you don't give up. So it's that understanding that you can't stop when things doesn't seem to be going your way. God is not going to reveal himself to a person that subparly is searching him. And lastly, I would bring Luke 11:28, right? He's clear. It's actually a conversation that Jesus is having with a woman, and then I love the amplified version of it. He says, blessed is the woman that birthed you. So you see what she wants to do, and she wants to give credit to his mother, Mary. But Jesus says, blessed is rather is one who hears my words and does what it says. And I love it in the amplified version. It says, blessed and happily favored are those who hear my words and continually observe it. So there's a continuation that I'm speaking about that can allow God to reveal himself to you eventually. And then there's no other passage than I believe it's Luke 24 on the road to Damascus. The conversation Jesus has with the disciples, right? And he points to them and shows them that these scriptures are about me. And in order for you to get that understanding, he had to reveal it to them. So I know we're looking other places for God. God is right here in his word. You know what I'm saying? So I think because we're so captivated, our arguments were captivated by experiences, supernatural experiences. Listen, those supernatural experiences can get you enough to believe that the supernatural exists, but it's not going to sustain your faith. You're not going to be motivated, encouraged to believe life, believe how you are and living your life. So I think those things will captivate you temporarily. But in any relationship, it takes time. It's a process, and that's who God is, and that's how we need to understand that if we want any sort of sustainability with God, it comes that understanding that faith is the substance of things hopeful, the evidence of things not seen, and that takes a while for you to be convinced of that. And I believe faith is a reason trust, and that's why we have all the testimonies. I love Hebrews 11 because it's the whole of faith. Is all these individuals in there that some died, some were murdered, and that's Hebrews 11:35-40 if you want to check it out. All these things happened and didn't see what we see now. And therefore, these are examples that point us back to, hey, these things happen in a way that I think we're missing, we're not truly grasping and understanding. And don't pay attention to the outside noise. That's not going to get you to where you need to be. I think we need to go back and understand that these things work for these people for a particular reason. And I would say Romans 12:2, do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. All of it points back to his word. And that's why I think we need to go for our source of inspiration and desire to live a life that we can say that we're worthy of our calling.
Awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
Listen, I want to talk some sports real quick.
Yeah, sure.
I'm so filled up.
Actually, there's one thing I want to say that I think is important too.
Please.
That also shaped and changed my mind as well. Well, I think the biggest question that I had for myself is, how do you experience God's love? That was my question when I first started. Yeah. And I realized in two passages, I realized in the book of First John about how to experience God's love is that God's love is embedded in each and every one of us. It's important that because the first two commandments, love the Lord your God with your heart, mind, soul, your soul strength, love your neighbor as yourself, really points and identifies that you don't love yourself first. You love God first. And when you love God first, God loves through you, right? And then there's a passage in Judges with Gideon. And Gideon is complaining about all that has transpired to his people. And then God simply says, am I not sending you? So sometimes the experience of love comes at the cost of how we treat our brothers and sisters, right? Gospel of John, chapter 15, says, they will know you are my disciples based upon how you love one another. So I think what we're really missing is that we're called to be selfless individuals, and that selflessness allows God to operate through you so that people can see what love is all about, and it's happening. So no one has ever seen God. This is in First John. But if we love one another, God's love is complete in us. So I think we miss that mark all the time. And a lot of this, again, this happened for me through studying the scriptures and seeking God and allowing some revelation knowledge and some I would call not revelation knowledge, but I would call public revelation knowledge. And that means something that's accessible for all of us. Some things are sealed only to those that God reveals to who are diligently seeking him. And some of it is revealed to those who don't, is revealed to all those who read carefully and just understand the basics. Last thing I'll say is this. If you go to John 3:16, so many of us read God so loved the world that he sent his one and only son that whoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. But none of us really pay attention to the fact that a lot of us who don't believe it, remove ourselves from God's favor. We take ourselves out. Because I would say in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 34, it said, God opposes the proud but shows favor to the humble and oppressed. And we know that God causes the sun to shine on the righteous and the unrighteous, and the rain to fall on the righteous and the unrighteous. So if you look at a scale from 0 to 2, and you have that one there, that verse I told you in Luke 11:28, to gain God's favor and for your relationship to develop, is for you to seek God. That's on scale number 2. A lot of us are on scale number 1, which means that we receive favor from God even if we don't even believe it. There's people that are successful and reaping benefits from God because of the rain falling on the righteous and the unrighteous. But the more we move from God, the more we remove ourselves from his favor. So we are technically removing ourselves from God's glory, honor, and everything that he has for us. So it's a choice. It's a choice what we choose to do, right? So it's there. The problem is, are we going to embrace it or are we going to reject it? So I thought those are 2 points I thought would be helpful to share.
Great points. And especially that grace and that favor that comes before us before we even realize it, right?
Exactly.
And if we continue to not realize it, it starts to stop,
Yeah. And you did it to yourself, right? God didn't do that. You took it, you removed yourself, right? So,
exactly. And so I want to ask you this. This is a hard pivot, right? Because it's been great. But the NCAA tournament, we've been talking about that. Kenny and I have been talking about that for weeks now. And so, Johnathan, did this tournament feel different to you because of, I think, with the transfer portal and the likeness, the being able to get paid? This just from the beginning felt a little different. Like there were teams that was so good that hadn't really been that good in the past, but then you dug into their roster. They had guys that were 4 and 5 year, college players. Thus, we have, UConn, San Diego State tonight, and all logic points to UConn should crush them. But who knows if that's going to happen? What did you see during this tournament?
So I think the most important thing that surprised me is, I think San Diego State was surprising, right? Especially the buzzer beater.
Oh my
right?
God!
No, I looked at that and I said they're done, right? That's what I thought, right? So I think they're definitely a come up, but it goes to show you that hey, if you play a strong game for 40 minutes, it's anybody's game.
Yeah,
Is that I think we get a lot of that from football, right? On any given Sunday.
Yeah.
Not the best team wins all the time. We know in 7-game series in the NBA, the best team, hands down, departing of injury, usually wins. So I think right now, but UConn's been consistent. I mean, they've been blowing teams out at least by 10 points.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of us felt that Miami's defense would at least hold up, right?
Yeah.
And they've been consistent, especially they have multiple players that can go and get them a bucket. But it didn't matter, right?
Yeah.
So I think in terms of the likeness and what's going on, especially in college sports, like that's a new phenomenon. I think that's still adjustment. You have some people that say, people shouldn't be previewed to that sort of access. But as I'm looking at what's going to transpire tonight, if I'm being consistent, I mean, I think UConn has not faltered
Not at all.
No weakness. I'll be surprised if they lose tonight.
I would do.
I'll be really surprised.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when they crushed Gonzaga, that was
That
a turning
was
point.
that
I
was
was like,
telling.
yeah, their
And
team
they're a good
is,
team. So
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah. Um,
think it's their year. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think we might have lost Kenny for a second. So I'll ask you this last question, and then, well, two more questions because I want people to know how they can contact you. But the Knicks, are you excited? Are you a Nick fan, or you're there in Brooklyn, so
So
you have the
so
team
for
there?
basketball wise, man, I was pretty frustrated with the whole debacle in Brooklyn.
Yes,
But
yeah, yeah.
Bridges looks promising. I mean,
He's a good player.
he's a good
Wow.
player.
Yeah,
We know him for his decent defensive prowess, but
yeah,
his offense, I mean, what is he averaging 30?
yeah.
But
Unbelievably,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
he's good. I was just really upset with the whole KD and Kyrie
yeah.
departure.
Ah,
I you know, and then when they had James Harden, I mean, listen, I think we could talk about this for days. That if KD's foot's not on the line, we're talking about a whole nother thing
yeah.
against the Milwaukee Bucks,
This is
right?
true.
They won
Yeah,
that series, and
yeah,
he did it by himself, right?
yeah,
With a couple of with the guys, right?
yeah,
The people that was there.
yeah,
But the Knicks, I mean, whoever they play, it's going to be a tough series. I think they're
yeah,
going to end up playing the Cavaliers, right? It's looking
yeah.
like it.
More than likely, yeah, yeah,
And man, to think Donovan Mitchell could have been there,
yeah.
but the Knicks, man, they good defense,
Yeah,
solid. I mean, we know that what's his name is out due to the ankle
yeah.
for the
Julius
rest of the
Randle.
Julius
Yeah,
Randle. He's out.
yeah,
So the question becomes, with him being out, will he be ready for when they start the playoffs? We hope so. But
yeah.
I mean, Brunson has brought life into that team.
Uh, he's been unbelievable.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I know a lot of people are saying they couldn't battle with anybody else. I think they could do fairly well against the Celtics.
yeah,
I think they beat the Celtics, right? Was it two
yeah,
to one in the series?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
They're three
so
out of four this year. Yeah,
yeah, so to
yeah,
me, I think we're underestimating their ability to play good defense, and they got scoring from everywhere.
yeah,
So I think that's good.
yeah,
There's one thing I do want to talk about.
yeah.
I'm a Jet fan, man, and
Oh,
I'm excited right now.
yeah.
Right, potential Aaron Rodgers, but we don't know what's going on, what's holding it up
Uh,
with this. With I mean, I don't like that they traded away more because I mean,
yeah, yeah,
I wasn't too content because I mean,
yeah,
Zach Wilson, such a failure. I was thinking the other day, I said, what if we had Justin Fields, man? What if
yeah,
we had Justin Fields?
yeah, yeah,
I'm just the opportunity to be happy if Rodgers comes. I
yeah.
know people are questioning his age and whatnot, but I mean he
No,
could throw that football, and we're missing that. We're missing that.
I mean, I've been a Jet fan for my whole life. I don't remember their one Super Bowl championship.
Yeah.
I'm not even that old,
Uh-huh.
Um, but I've gotten used to and now I'm excited, and Kenny knows this about Aaron Rodgers coming because at first I'm like, okay, it seems like another Brett Favre thing, only a couple of years. I'd rather go after Lamar Jackson, even Jimmy Garoppolo, Derek Carr. I was looking at one of those guys, but now that it's just about there, I'm really excited. So, but let's get this done already, because
Right? To
because
be
if
on
this fall,
primetime games, it'll be amazing. The Jets on a primetime game.
oh,
I don't
which is
remember the last time that happened.
yeah,
Right? Except the butt fumble on Thursday
hmm,
on Thanksgiving.
I
That was a
know,
disgrace.
right?
Right? I can't get
Yeah,
that out of my memory. And,
yeah. I
yeah.
I think I think the Jets. What scares me, Jonathan and Kenny, if this trade doesn't go through, what do the Jets do from here? I think Rodgers could walk off into retirement or go back to Green Bay. They'll, I don't know. I think that's irreparable. I think maybe, but
Yeah, I think that's long gone
I think
with
that's done. But what do the Jets do?
I don't know. We can't have Zach on the center. I mean,
No,
it was a debacle. Like
yeah,
it was just like the one thing I hated about watching Jets football, and I think what brought me, to tears, is just the no offense. It was
yeah,
just this is three and out, three and out, three and
uh,
out. It was like
yeah,
terrible. And
yeah,
I mean, look when Matt White went in there and got a couple first downs, it was like
yeah.
man.
We
This
got a
is
first
beautiful,
down.
right? Like
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
never see that. And I mean, them getting rid of him,
yeah,
I think he could have been a good backup. And I don't think he was. And him playing hurt that game in Seattle, I mean, we knew he wasn't 100%, and he
Yeah,
looked promising. He
he
could
did.
throw the ball.
Yeah.
And then I wasn't so sold with the offensive coordinator. I don't know. Hack it now. I don't. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know. There's a lot of
Yeah.
questions there, but like you said, excitement,
Yeah.
hope,
Yeah.
openness. I'm just hoping that, man,
Yeah.
I have something to cheer for, and to see us in the playoffs, and I can't wait if it's possible.
Yeah.
If it's and Odell Beckham potentially, I hear he's coming.
I
We'll
saw
see.
that. Yeah. Yeah. He's
Yeah.
asking for a lot of money though, right? Is he asking for like 15
Mm.
million and what for 1 year or something like that?
Yeah, I don't think we need
Yeah.
that. We have a lot of good talent. I know we got to get rid of uh, the receiver that we got from Tennessee. Man, he's just dropping passes.
Yeah.
Corey Davis, get him
Yeah.
out of there. I would have
Yeah.
referred him out and more, but then I see why they went for more because there's a lot of unpotential back he
Yeah.
hasn't gained access to, and that's due to the lack of quarterback play.
Yeah, and he was unhappy. I can't imagine a second, third year player taking themselves out of a game like that, the way he did and just kind of walked off. I think that really stuck in the Jets' craw, that they were like, who's this kid think he is, Um, hey, Kenny, you want to ask anything for sports? If not, we'll ask Jonathan how people can contact him and we can wrap up. But I don't know if you had anything else. 'Cause I know you might not have heard some of the stuff that we were talking about.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna ask more on the Jets. I think you guys covered that pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll ask this real quick. Who do you think is gonna be the NBA MVP?
I would like it to be Joan B. I think
Yeah.
he earned it.
Yeah.
I think he earned it. I think because Giannis is, but I mean, look how great they were without him. Come on, supposed to be the most valuable player.
Yeah.
What did they go like
Yeah.
at one point, 15-2 or something like that?
Yeah.
So I would not. I don't think. I think Joan B really earned it. I really do. I think he plays on both sides of the floor when he's healthy.
Yeah.
And I mean, Jokic back to back. I mean, man, you can't be a triple MVP and not have a championship. But
Well,
I mean, Murray looked like from yesterday playing the Warriors. Murray looks like he's back to form, and if
yeah.
he is, we got a problem.
Yeah.
Because I remember when them two. I mean, just having Jokic were pretty good,
Yeah.
but Murray wasn't there. And now if he's back, remember him and Donovan Mitchell. I think they both have 50-point games one time in the playoffs. They were
Yeah.
going back and forth. But if Murray is back, then I think Denver as a number one seed will be a tough task out.
Wow.
And even looking at who's going to be representing the West or the East, it's tough because my gut says I like the Warriors. I like Steph Curry. I really do. But Andrew Wiggins been missing.
Yeah.
Defense, I mean, we just got back Gary Payton the third,
Yeah.
and he's pretty solid.
Yeah.
So I think in the West it's very hard to tell. And KD's doing KD, averaging 35 in the sleep.
Yeah.
Basic concepts.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
don't know. It's tough to see who's gonna come from both sides. East, I think it might be the Celtics again because they look unstoppable. What did they beat? They beat Milwaukee by 40,
Oh,
like the other night, right? Just
yeah.
stomped
Yeah.
them, right?
Yeah.
So if
Cincinnati.
if
Yeah.
they continue to play like they've been playing,
Yeah.
no one's beating them. And in the West, it's a toss up. Anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sacramento's who would have thought Sacramento Kings number 3,
Yeah.
right? In the West? Who would have thought that? Right? You
Yeah.
you can take you a long
Right.
way.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of surprises this year.
Yeah.
A lot of surprises this year.
Jonathan, this has been amazing. So your podcast, I really want to highly recommend for folks to listen to and talk a little bit about that and how people can connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's 3 ways you can connect with me. I have a Facebook group called I'm a Believer. Again, it's called I'm a Believer. And there we usually try to inspire and motivate one another daily. There's usually a verse. I give people get free access to conversate, dialogue, post whatever thing biblically related up on the option for the story. Try to give people opportunity to do that. Another way you can contact me is on Instagram, the truth of TMIS. The truth of TMIS. I'm not that frequently active on there. I'm learning to be, right? Not the best when it comes there, but you can contact me. And then finally, email, right? I don't think I'm on such a high horse. I'm always open to dialogue and conversation. I believe we don't grow in isolation, we grow in community. And I think the more opportunities you have to talk to people and get a much more understanding. And the more you get to express your faith, the more you're growing. The conversations, right? I think that's a beautiful thing. So my email address is speed, SPEED, and then it's ED at the end of it. So it's speeded83@gmail.com. And I actually created that inspiration football wise in high school, and I kept that email ever since.
Wow.
You can definitely contact me there, and those are where you can reach me.
Awesome. Fantastic. Fantastic. Kenny, you ready to take us home? Johnathan, by the way, God bless everything you're doing.
I'm ready. Here we go.
God bless everything you're doing, man. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
And we look to connect with you further. So thank
Yes, I would love to have you on the show, man. Sports,
Anytime.
it would definitely. So
Anytime.
we gotta link. We gotta connect that. That would be great.
Yeah, anytime. I'm sure Kenny would love that. Absolutely, anytime. So you have my email address and all my contact stuff. So anytime.
Absolutely.
All right, Kenny, take us home, man.
All right. This is Kenny Squared End.
And Kenny and Johnathan
with Sports on the Positive Tip. We will see you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in.
Absolutely.